Undoubtedly, one of the most compelling drivers of success is effective leadership, and learning to be self reliant is equally crucial in life. Well, students, this is what we are going to learn after comprehending the chapter Indigo, which is an excerpt taken from one of the best books ever written on Gandhiji. The name of the book is The Life of Mahatma Gandhi by Louis Fischer. Hello dear students, this is Sushma Singh and you are watching Booster Classes. Watch the video till end and get benefited. In this module, I'm going to give you the core of this lesson in an extremely coherent manner so that you can apprehend with ease the storyline, its theme, and the title aptness. We shall also discuss the character traits of the main characters, as well as there will be a few questions for your comprehension check at the end. Before moving on to the comprehensive study of this chapter, let me give you its overview. Louis Fischer was an admirer of Gandhiji and he met Gandhiji several times and wrote his biography entitled The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. And this chapter, Indigo, is taken from that book. The author has described here how a persistent sharecropper named Rajkumar Shukla managed to take Gandhiji to Champaran, and the story revolves around the struggle of Gandhiji in order to safeguard sharecroppers from the atrocities of landlords. This chapter also highlights the leadership shown by Gandhiji, and the events and facts in the chapter help the readers understand Gandhiji's method of non-violence that proved not only to be instrumental but also got support from thousands of people. This made Gandhiji the leader of India's struggle for independence. This chapter, Indigo, imparts some noteworthy life lessons because it deals with an account of an unequal battle between the oppressed and the oppressors, and thus conveys a very strong message that patience, grit, and determination can take us a long way. This lesson brings out the necessity of being practical in difficult circumstances. Self-help is the best help is emphasized on. This lesson also highlights that effective leadership can inspire and empower people to realize their full potential. It shows the way Mahatma Gandhi secured justice for the oppressed through convincing argumentation and negotiation. Here we begin with the story. In December 1916, at the annual conference of the Indian National Congress Party in Lucknow, Gandhiji was approached by a poor, skinny and illiterate peasant, Rajkumar Shukla from Champaran. He had come to Gandhiji to complain about the injustice meted out to the peasants in Champaran, and this has made their condition miserable and pathetic. Gandhiji did not give him any assurance because he had appointments to go to other parts of India in the coming days. However, Shukla was resolute, very much determined, and he followed Gandhiji wherever he went. He even went to his ashram, and this impressed Gandhiji because he was impressed with his tenacity and his dedication to accomplish his job, and that he could not refuse Rajkumar Shukla now. So at last Gandhiji fixed a date and asked him to meet him in Kolkata, from where both of them went to Patna by train. Gandhiji's wish to meet Rajendra Prasad, a lawyer, did not take place as he was out of town. Gandhiji was led by Rajkumar Shukla to the house of Rajendra Prasad. As Gandhiji was in a simple dress and due to the company of Rajkumar Shukla, the servants of Rajendra Prasad presumed that Gandhiji too was a peasant of Champaran. They both were treated as peasants and were made to sit on the floor, thinking that Gandhiji too was an untouchable. They did not allow Gandhiji to draw water from the well for fear that some drops of water from his bucket may pollute the entire well. Being meticulous, Gandhiji decided to visit Muzaffarpur first because he wanted to obtain complete information about the plight of the peasants in Champaran and wanted to perceive the problem from every angle so that he could come to a logical and just conclusion. And on being informed, A.B. Kripalani, along with a large number of students, came to the station to receive Gandhiji. Even Professor Milkani, who was a teacher in a government school, showed a great deal of courage and compassion by giving shelter to a man who was working against the British. It was indeed a commendable and an extraordinary thing in those days, especially because people were afraid and the government servants had the fear of losing job also. Those who harbored them were tortured very badly by the British. Gandhiji's arrival was a ray of hope among peasants. So they come rushing to Muzaffarpur and lawyers briefed him on the case. But Gandhiji rebuked them for collecting high fees from the peasants. Now Gandhiji decided to change the line of action because he sensed the unrest and felt going to court would not do any good to the peasants. The real assistance to these crushed and fear-stricken peasants would be to free them from fear. And he knew he should arm them with the tool of courage and fearlessness so that they can unite together and stand up for their rights. Let's now talk about the unfair deal. The sharecroppers were forced to plant 15% of their holdings with indigo and surrender the whole indigo harvest as rent. This was done by a long-term contract so that British can have the peasants under their control. Now Germany had developed synthetic indigo and therefore the plantation of natural indigo was not profitable. Now the landlords wanted compensation for freeing the peasants from 15% agreement. Now to this, many peasants agreed, while a few of them registered and even engaged lawyers. Soon the news of synthetic indigo also reached the peasants, and this made them see through the tricks that they were cheated by the British. Those who had paid compensation now started demanding their money back. A dispute arose between the landlords and the sharecroppers, and those peasants who had registered to sign the agreement were actually forced to sign by being threatened by thugs hired by the landlords. How did Gandhiji's non-cooperation help the peasants of Champaran? Let's find out now. To get the facts, Gandhiji visited the secretary of the British Landlords Association, but he refused to give information to an outsider. Next, Gandhiji called on the British official commissioner. He only warned him and advised him to quit Champaran. Actually, the British tried their best to keep Gandhiji out of this because they knew what he did in South Africa. Now, Gandhiji was on his way to a neighboring village where a peasant was ill-treated. On his way, he was stopped by the police superintendent's messenger and was ordered to return to town. But Gandhiji refused to obey the civil order and thus he was summoned to appear in court the very next day. Gandhiji now wired Rajendra Prasad to rush to Bihar with influential friends. He even wired full report to the viceroy. Peasants also came in thousands and held demonstration. Huge mob was there in front of the courthouse to support Gandhiji. The British officials felt helpless and powerless after finding the uncontrollable crowd. This spontaneous show of peasants' courage and unity baffled the British. The authorities were in effect, they were indecisive. This spontaneous demonstration was actually the beginning of freedom from the fear of the British. Gandhiji helped them, but he gave them proof that the power of the British could be challenged by Indians now. The government was bewildered. Talking about Gandhiji's reason for disobedience, we can see that in court, Gandhiji read a statement pleading guilty. He said that he was in conflict of duties. On one hand, he did not want to set a bad example as a lawbreaker, and on the other hand, he had to render humanitarian and national service. He said that he had acted in accordance with the voice of conscience and asked for the punishment due. He even refused to furnish bail. Here we shall find when and how did civil disobedience triumph in India for the first time. In the event of Gandhiji's arrest, the lawyers were to return to their places. However, Gandhiji's sincere purpose, convincing argumentation, and logical approach deeply influenced the lawyers. They thought that though Gandhiji was a total stranger, yet he was prepared to go to prison for the sake of peasants. And now, if they did not have the peasants, it would certainly be shameful desertion. Because not only were they residents of the adjoining districts, but also claimed to have served these peasants. Now they were ready to follow Gandhiji even to jail. Thus, Gandhiji was able to win the lawyers' trust, and their support made Gandhiji confident to declare that the Battle of Champaran was won. Days later, the Lieutenant Governor had to drop the case against Gandhiji. Civil disobedience, a movement of the people, had been victorious for the first time in modern India. All the events at Champaran had actually led the foundation of the Indian independence movement. Gandhiji and the lawyers conducted a detailed inquiry into the grievances of the farmers. They prepared cases for about 10,000 peasants and even collected relevant documents. Gandhiji had 4 interviews with the Lieutenant Governor, who appointed an official commission of inquiry. The commission, comprising landlords, government officials, and Gandhiji as the sole representative of the farmers, actually gathered a lot of evidence against the British landlords. The evidence proved that the agreement between landlords and the peasants was certainly one-sided. So, the British landlords agreed to make refunds to the peasants. Gandhiji asked the landlords for 50% repayment but was offered only 25%. Gandhiji agreed to the refund amount to end the deadlock. It was just to end the deadlock because it was a moral victory for the peasant. Gandhiji believed that refund amount did not matter because money was not the cause of the fight. The aim was that the British should accept that they were wrong. It was the loss of prestige of the British that was more important. And for the peasants, they had gained what no money could buy because they had learned the lesson of courage. Gandhiji solved the problem of the indigo farmers by making it people's struggle and involving everyone, right from the sharecroppers to the lawyers. This victory made the peasants realize that they had their rights and gave them confidence to fight their own battles. They do not have to be afraid of the British. This was their first lesson in moral courage. They learned to have faith in the judiciary. The settlement changed the condition of the peasant. Previously, the landlords behaved as lords above the law, but now the peasants saw that they had rights and defenders. What did Gandhiji do to alleviate the cultural and social backwardness in the Champaran village? Let's find out now. He was not satisfied by just addressing a problem. Gandhiji was concerned about the overall well-being of all Indians. His any political problem was interwoven with common man's day-to-day problem. He wanted to bring practical solution to all problems. And so, being a visionary, he aimed at improving the cultural and social backwardness of Champaran. He sought volunteers for teaching in order to improve the social lot of the people. His own family, including wife and son, volunteered for the work. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Kasturbabai taught ashram rules and hygiene. Health conditions were also taken care of because health conditions were really miserable in Champaran. He got a doctor to render his services for 6 months. Medicines like castor oil, quinine, and sulfur ointment were made available free of cost. Undoubtedly, Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life because the Champaran episode was a landmark in Gandhi's style of fighting against the British rule. It was not a simple victory. Gandhiji learned the power of unity and non-violence. Through the Champaran incident, Gandhiji declared for the first time that the British could not order Indians in their own country. He learned that the British could be challenged by Indians now. It was the first time in the history of modern India that the civil disobedience triumphed. Through this episode, not only did Gandhiji raise his voice against the injustice of the landlord system in Bihar, but also helped the Indians to liberate themselves from the fear of the British. Thus, it took his people a step nearer to the Indian independence movement. Champaran episode did not begin as an act of defiance. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate the distress of a large number of sharecroppers. Thus, self-reliance, Indian independence movement, and help to sharecroppers were actually all bound together. Indeed, this was from where he first began his journey of fame and success as a Mahatma. Gandhiji wanted to teach the lawyers the lesson of self-reliance, so he opposed to the idea that C.F. Andrews would stay in Champaran for the support of the Indians in their unequal fight. Gandhiji wanted the Indians to face the crisis on their own. His mission was to mold a new free India that could stand on its own feet. And Andrews' help would be a prop, and this would reveal nothing but a lack of confidence. According to Gandhiji, if one's cause is just, victory can be attained by fighting in a fair manner and peacefully also. Thus, Gandhiji taught everybody the lesson of self-reliance. Here now we shall talk about the character traits of two major characters of this lesson, Rajkumar Shukla and Mahatma Gandhi. Rajkumar Shukla was one of the poor and illiterate sharecroppers of Champaran. He was determined to fight against the injustice of the British landlords. Rajkumar Shukla became a catalyst for change by taking Gandhiji to Champaran, and with his help he was able to bring an end to the sharecroppers' exploitation. Now, talking about Mahatma Gandhi, we can certainly say that he was a visionary and a man of courage. His fundamental principles were non-violence and self-reliance. Gandhiji had a magnetic attraction and great persuasive power. He was a great influencer leader as well. He used to connect with masses very easily. Gandhiji finally emerged as a champion of the downtrodden and the oppressed. He lived a simple and pious life serving the nation. As regards the aptness of the title, we find that the title Indigo is highly suggestive and appropriate one. It focuses our attention on the British high-handedness and oppression, as well as the contributions made by the masses to the freedom movement of India. The Champaran movement that centered on indigo sharecropping led to the social and cultural upliftment of the indigo peasants, the plight of indigo sharecroppers, the struggle under Gandhiji's leadership, and the ultimate victory form important landmarks. For your comprehension check, here are a few important questions based on the chapter. Take help from the explanation which I have just given to you, and I'm sure you will get all the answers. Please give an attempt to solve them and deepen your understanding. Keep watching to get all inclusive study materials. Thank you.